ladies and gentlemen. You've been told to stay positive, as if your dreams depend on a permanent smile. But here's the truth: your mood is like the weather. It changes without warning, and if you build your life around it, you'll spend half your days standing in the rain, waiting for the sun to return. Some of you are trapped in this invisible prison. You only work when you feel good. And when you don't feel good, you wait until the spark comes back. But what if the spark never comes? What if your future depends on the days you don't feel like showing up? In the next few minutes, I'll show you why letting your mood decide your actions is silently destroying your potential, and how to replace that fragile emotional fuel with something that doesn't run out. By the end, you'll understand why the people who win in life aren't always the happiest. They're the ones who keep moving, even when the fire inside feels cold. A good mood feels like a gentle wind at your back, pushing you forward without much effort. It's light, it's energizing, and it makes everything seem possible. On those days, you feel as though the universe is conspiring in your favor. The tasks you once dreaded seem manageable, even enjoyable. But here is the hard truth. Moods are temporary. They rise and fall like tides, often without reason, and certainly without your permission. If you build your life's progress on something so unstable, you're setting yourself up for constant stops and starts, forever at the mercy of your emotions. You've probably experienced this before. You wake up feeling inspired, the world seems full of opportunity, and you make promises to yourself: today, I'll be disciplined. Today, I'll do the hard work. Today, I'll push forward. And for a few hours, maybe even a few days, you do. But then, without warning, the mood fades. You wake up one morning and the excitement is gone. Nothing happened. No tragedy, no crisis, just a shift inside you, like the sun hiding behind clouds. And because you've been depending on that sunny feeling to act, you find yourself slowing down, postponing, telling yourself you'll try again when the spark returns. Days pass. Weeks, sometimes months. The dream that felt alive begins to wither, not because you lacked ability, but because you mistook a passing feeling for a permanent fuel source. This is the trap so many fall into, confusing a good mood with readiness. But readiness is not emotional, it's a decision. If you wait for the perfect emotional state to act, you will spend most of your life waiting. Feelings are unstable by nature. They are influenced by sleep, weather, diet, random interactions, even something as small as the tone of a stranger's voice. If your capacity to move forward is tied to something so fragile, your life will forever be dictated by forces outside your control. Think of moods like weather patterns. A sunny day may encourage you to go outside, but you wouldn't cancel your entire life because it's raining. Yet that's exactly what people do with their goals when their mood turns bad. They stay indoors, metaphorically speaking, waiting for better weather. But the people who truly achieve, whether in business, art, health, or personal growth, are the ones who have learned to keep walking, even in the storm. They know that while moods pass, the consequences of inaction can last for years. A good mood can be a bonus, but it must never be the foundation. Imagine building a house on sand. It might look beautiful for a time, but the moment the ground shifts, the whole thing collapses. Your actions need a stronger base. Values, discipline, commitment, and the deep clarity of why you are doing what you are doing. When those are your foundation, moods become irrelevant. You may prefer working in a state of excitement, but you don't require it. You work anyway. This is why people who seem unstoppable aren't necessarily happier than everyone else. They've simply divorced their output from their emotions. They act not because they feel like it, but because they've decided the action matters more than the feeling. In fact, some of the most significant breakthroughs in life come on days when you feel the least inspired, when showing up feels like dragging your own weight uphill. Those days are tests. They're the proof of whether you're building something lasting or just playing with it when the mood strikes. Consider an athlete in training. If they only worked out when they felt motivated, they'd never reach the peak of their ability. Training requires showing up in the cold, in the rain, when the body aches and the mind protests. And yet, that consistency transforms them not just physically, but mentally. Over time, they learn that feelings are waves to be ridden, not walls to be stopped by. The same principle applies to everything. Writing a book, starting a business, improving your health, even building stronger relationships. It's tempting to romanticize the good mood, to believe that life will always give you the right emotional conditions before you do something worthwhile. But life doesn't work that way. Some days you will wake up in a fog. Some days you will feel disconnected from your own vision. And yet, these are the days that matter most. Because acting in alignment with your purpose, when you feel low, proves that your commitment is deeper than your mood. That is the kind of action that compounds over time, building results so strong they remain standing long after the winds of emotion have shifted. You must begin to see your mood for what it is, a visitor, not a ruler. When it's good, welcome it and use the energy it brings. When it's bad, acknowledge it, but continue your path. The goal is not to eliminate emotional highs and lows. That's impossible. The goal is to prevent them from deciding the direction of your life. Once you stop treating a good mood as your only source of energy, you become free. Free to act on purpose. Free to be consistent. Free to chase what you truly want without waiting for the right feeling to knock on your door. When you understand this, you stop asking, "How do I get motivated?" and start asking, "What needs to be done?" The first question keeps you trapped in emotional dependency. The second keeps you moving forward regardless of how you feel. And that is how real progress is made, not by chasing moods, but by transcending them. If you can learn to do this, something extraordinary happens. The good moods still come, and when they do, they add a sense of joy and momentum to your work. But they're no longer necessary for you to act. Your life begins to take shape, not in bursts of enthusiasm, but in steady, deliberate steps. And in time, you'll look back and realize you've built something solid, something that stands not because you felt good every day, but because you chose to keep building even when you didn't. Discipline is the quiet, unseen force that outlasts every emotional high and low. It is not glamorous, it does not demand applause, and it rarely feels exciting in the moment. Yet it is the one thing that can carry you through when your feelings have deserted you entirely. Discipline doesn't rely on the warmth of inspiration or the thrill of a good mood. It is the act of doing what must be done, regardless of how you feel about it in that moment. And that is why it is more powerful than any fleeting surge of motivation. Most people live at the mercy of their emotional weather. When they feel inspired, they work hard. When they feel low, they stop. Their progress is a jagged line filled with bursts of energy followed by long stretches of inactivity. But discipline smooths that line. It removes the erratic peaks and valleys and replaces them with steady forward movement. The pace may not always be fast, but it is relentless. And in the end, that constancy beats the erratic sprint every time. Think of discipline as the engine of a ship. Emotions are like the wind. Sometimes they push you forward, sometimes they push you off course, and sometimes they disappear altogether. If your journey depends only on the wind, you'll drift aimlessly. But when you have an engine, you can keep moving no matter the weather. That's what discipline does. It gives you a way forward when inspiration is nowhere to be found. Discipline is often misunderstood as a form of punishment or self-denial. In reality, it is the greatest form of self-respect. It's the willingness to honor the commitments you've made to yourself, even when your current feelings try to convince you otherwise. It's looking at your goal and saying, "This matters enough for me to act, even if I'd rather do something easier." Every time you choose discipline over mood, you strengthen the trust you have in yourself. And that trust becomes the foundation of everything else you build. Without discipline, emotions become your master. On days you feel good, they'll push you forward. On days you feel bad, they'll keep you still. But with discipline, you reverse that power dynamic. You become the one steering the ship, using emotions when they're helpful, ignoring them when they're not. This is why disciplined people often achieve things that seem impossible to those who rely solely on motivation. They don't need to feel like doing something in order to do it. Discipline also has a way of transforming the very feelings that once held you back. Action creates momentum, and momentum often generates the very motivation you were waiting for. Many people think they need to feel motivated before taking action. But the truth is, motivation often comes after you've started, not before. This is the paradox of discipline. By acting without waiting for the right mood, you often create the good mood you thought you needed to begin. But discipline requires clarity. You cannot be disciplined if you don't know what you're aiming for. Vague intentions like "I want to be successful" or "I want to be healthier" are too weak to anchor consistent action. You need a clear vision, a definite picture of the outcome you're working toward. This clarity makes discipline easier because you're not just forcing yourself to act. You're reminding yourself why the action matters in the first place. The truth is, discipline is uncomfortable. It asks you to step outside your comfort zone regularly. It forces you to do things you don't feel like doing. But the discomfort is temporary, and what it produces is lasting. That workout you don't feel like doing today may only take an hour, but the strength it builds will remain with you for years. That project you push yourself to complete may exhaust you in the moment, but the doors it opens could change the course of your life. Discipline creates a kind of freedom that moods never can. When you're disciplined, you no longer fear the days when you don't feel like it because you know they can't stop you. You no longer wait for ideal circumstances because you've learned to work with whatever circumstances you have. This self-reliance is powerful. It means your progress is no longer fragile, no longer dependent on something as unpredictable as your feelings. Discipline builds identity. Every act of discipline reinforces the story you tell yourself about who you are. When you show up for your commitments day after day, you stop seeing yourself as someone who tries and start seeing yourself as someone who does. That identity becomes self-sustaining. It becomes harder to break the habit of showing up than it is to keep going. At that point, discipline stops feeling like a chore and starts feeling like a natural part of who you are. There will always be people who wait for the perfect moment to act, for the ideal alignment of mood, motivation, and circumstances. They will spend years in this waiting room, never realizing that the moment they're waiting for is one they can create through disciplined action. Those who understand the power of discipline don't wait, they act. And by acting, they build the very future. Others are still imagining. When you feel your mood slipping, when motivation feels distant, remind yourself this is the moment discipline was made for. Anyone can move forward when the conditions are perfect. The real test and the real reward comes from moving forward when they're not. Once you embrace discipline as the foundation of your strategy, moods become background noise. You still enjoy the days when you feel good, but they're no longer the deciding factor. You become consistent, unshakable, and capable of creating results that others might call luck, but you'll know were built by the quiet, patient force of discipline. And that force, unlike a good mood, never has to fade. Motivation is one of the most overvalued forces people depend on, yet it is also one of the most fragile. It's often spoken of as if it were the golden key to success, the magical spark that will finally get you to start, to commit, to push beyond your limits. But this belief is an illusion, and it is dangerous. Motivation, like a good mood, is fleeting. It comes and goes in bursts, often arriving at the most random times and disappearing just as quickly. To treat it as your primary driver is to build your life on something that cannot be held. Many people never begin their most important work because they are waiting for motivation to arrive. They think, once I feel ready, I'll do it, or once I feel inspired, I'll start. But readiness, in this sense, is a trap. It's the equivalent of standing at the edge of a cold lake, telling yourself you'll jump in when you feel comfortable. You can wait all day and comfort will never come. The water will never magically warm for you. Motivation works the same way. It doesn't always appear before you take action. More often, it's created by the act of moving forward. This is the first part of the illusion, believing that motivation is the starting point. The truth is, motivation is often the result. You take a step, you see a small win, and suddenly you feel more inclined to keep going. Yet, because so many people have been taught to wait for the feeling first, they never get to that first step. They stay locked in stillness, envying those who seem to always be motivated, without realizing those people are simply moving whether they feel like it or not. The second part of the illusion is believing that motivation is consistent. Even if you begin your journey with a surge of excitement, that initial fire will not burn at the same intensity forever. Life will present you with fatigue, setbacks, distractions, and days when the reason you started feels far away. On those days, the idea that you'll act only if motivated will leave you stranded. And if you've built your strategy on motivation alone, you will mistake the normal ebb of emotion as a sign that you should stop altogether. The people who achieve long-term goals don't rely on motivation to carry them. They rely on systems, routines, and discipline to guide them when the emotional fuel runs out. They understand that the most productive days are often the ones that begin without inspiration. They show up because they've committed to showing up, and in the process, they often find that motivation returns naturally. This is the irony. The less you chase motivation, the more it tends to appear. The third part of the illusion is that motivation is inherently positive. While it can be a powerful push forward, it can also be deceptive. Sometimes motivation is sparked by temporary emotions, a sudden rush of excitement, a burst of confidence, or even envy of someone else's success. These emotional spikes can lead you to overcommit, to set unrealistic goals, or to take on more than you can sustain. When the initial rush fades, you're left with a load you cannot carry, and the crash is often worse than the initial high. True progress doesn't come from chasing emotional peaks. It comes from steady, sustainable effort. Imagine a writer who decides to write only when inspiration strikes. They may produce a brilliant page one day and nothing for the next 2 weeks. Meanwhile, another writer commits to writing for 1 hour every morning, regardless of mood. Over time, the second writer produces far more work, and much of it will be better simply because they've been practicing consistently. The same principle applies to everything: training, building a business, learning a skill. The romantic idea of waiting for the muse is just another disguise for procrastination. There is also a subtle danger in becoming addicted to the feeling of motivation itself. Some people spend more time chasing the feeling than doing the work. They listen to speeches, read books, attend seminars, and scroll through inspirational quotes, all in search of that perfect rush of energy. But inspiration without action is like lightning without thunder. It flashes for a moment and is gone, leaving no lasting impact. The true measure of progress is not how often you feel inspired, but how often you act without needing to. Breaking free from the illusion of motivation means redefining what drives you. Instead of asking, "Do I feel like it?" you begin asking, "What needs to be done?" The first question ties your progress to your emotional state. The second ties it to your commitment and purpose. Over time, this shift changes your entire relationship with effort. Work becomes something you do because it aligns with your values and your vision, not because you happen to be in the mood. When you stop depending on motivation, you also stop fearing its absence. You no longer panic when the spark fades because you understand it was never meant to be constant. You begin to treat motivation like a welcome visitor. Enjoy it when it's there, but don't wait for it to start moving. This approach frees you from the roller coaster of highs and lows that so many people mistake for progress. The truth is, you don't need to feel like doing something in order to do it. You simply need to decide that it matters enough to be done. Once you understand that, you reclaim control over your actions. You stop waiting for the perfect moment, the right mood, or the magical surge of motivation that may never come. You start moving, and by moving, you generate the very energy you thought you needed to begin. And here's the most liberating part. When you build your actions on commitment instead of motivation, your results become inevitable. You are no longer a leaf tossed by the winds of feeling. You are the tree that stands regardless of the weather. The illusion shatters, and in its place, you find something far more reliable than motivation could ever offer. The quiet certainty that you can keep going, no matter how you feel. The cycle of waiting is a subtle trap, one that feels harmless at first, but can quietly steal years from your life. It begins with a thought. I'll start when the timing is better. I'll begin when I feel ready. I'll take action when the mood is right. It seems reasonable, after all. Who wants to move forward when conditions aren't perfect? But that reasoning hides a dangerous truth. Perfect conditions almost never arrive, and readiness is rarely something you feel before you begin. You tell yourself you're just waiting for the right moment, but days turn into weeks, weeks into months. Each morning you wake with the same intention, soon I'll do it, and each evening you tell yourself the same excuse. Today wasn't the right day. You convince yourself that tomorrow will be different, that the energy will come, that circumstances will align. And in doing so, you enter a loop where nothing changes because you're always waiting for the change to start. This cycle is seductive because it doesn't feel like quitting. You haven't abandoned your goal, you're just waiting. You still believe in it, still imagine yourself achieving it, still talk about it as if it's inevitable. But the reality is, nothing is moving. You are in the waiting room of your own life, staring at a door that you could walk through at any time, yet convincing yourself you need someone to call your name first. The danger of waiting is that it teaches your mind a habit to delay action until circumstances feel favorable. The more you repeat this habit, the more you reinforce the belief that you can't act unless the stars are perfectly aligned. Over time, this belief becomes so ingrained that you stop even noticing the moments you could move forward. You start interpreting every obstacle, no matter how small, as a reason to pause, and slowly, the window for action closes without you even realizing it. Life doesn't pause for you to feel ready. Opportunities don't stand still while you gather courage or wait for motivation to strike. They pass quietly and often without a second chance. The brutal truth is, the conditions you're waiting for may never come. That perfect moment in your mind, when you feel strong, inspired, and fully prepared, might be a fantasy. And if you keep chasing it, you may spend your entire life standing still. The most successful people are not those who wait for ideal conditions. They are the ones who act in less than ideal ones. They make progress while others are still preparing. They are willing to begin when the path is unclear, trusting that clarity will come through movement. They understand that action creates its own readiness. Each step taken builds confidence. Each effort made sharpens skill. Each small win generates momentum. The cycle of waiting is often fueled by fear. Fear of failure, fear of discomfort, fear of judgment. By waiting, you avoid confronting those fears directly. But the cost is that your dreams remain untouched, existing only in imagination. And here's the paradox. The longer you wait, the heavier the weight of inaction becomes. You begin to feel guilty for not starting. And that guilt becomes another reason to delay, because now starting means confronting not only the work ahead, but also the time already lost. Breaking the cycle requires a shift in mindset. Instead of asking, when will I be ready? You begin asking, what can I do right now with what I have? This question cuts through the illusion of the perfect moment. It forces you to work with the tools, time, and energy available to you, rather than dreaming of some future where everything is easier. And here's the truth. Those who succeed rarely begin with ideal circumstances. They begin where they are and improve along the way. There is a profound freedom in deciding that now is enough, that today, in all its imperfections, is still worthy of action. Once you embrace this, you start to see that waiting is rarely about readiness. It's about avoidance. And when you act, despite the discomfort, you realize the thing you feared most wasn't as heavy as you imagined. One of the most damaging effects of the waiting cycle is that it robs you of compounding progress. Small, consistent actions, even when imperfect, accumulate over time into extraordinary results. But every day spent waiting is a day lost forever, a day that could have been part of that compounding growth. It's like putting off investing in yourself while the clock is quietly draining away the interest you could have earned. It's important to see waiting for what it truly is, a choice, not something imposed on you by circumstance, but something you decide to do in the moment. And because it's a choice, you can choose differently. You can decide to start now, even if you feel unprepared, even if the mood isn't right, even if you're not entirely sure what the next step should be. The act of beginning breaks the loop. You look back and realize that the moment you stopped waiting was the moment your life began to move again. You'll see that readiness was never a prerequisite. It was a product of taking that first, uncertain step. And the more you act, the less you find yourself trapped in the cycle, because movement becomes your new habit. The cycle of waiting thrives on the illusion that there will always be more time, more chances, more tomorrows. But life is not infinite, and neither are the opportunities that pass before you. The only guarantee you have is the moment in front of you right now. And if you let it slip by in the hope that a better one is coming, you may one day realize you've been living in pause mode while the world kept playing. When you understand this deeply, you stop waiting for the right mood, the right season, the right conditions. You learn to move now, to adapt as you go, to build momentum even in uncertainty. And that is how you break free, by refusing to live in the waiting room and stepping into the life that's been calling you all along. Emotional storms are inevitable. No matter how disciplined, focused, or optimistic you try to be, there will be days when your inner world feels like a battlefield. Anxiety swirls like heavy clouds, frustration crackles like lightning, and doubt rolls in like thunder. These storms can come without warning, a careless comment, an unexpected setback, a moment of exhaustion, and suddenly your clarity is gone, replaced by a fog of feelings that makes even the simplest tasks seem impossible. It is in these moments that your strength is tested, not when the sun is shining and the path is clear. Most people try to avoid emotional storms altogether. They tell themselves they'll act when they feel calm, when their mind is steady, when they've regained that elusive sense of control. Emotional storms are not interruptions to life. They are a part of life. And learning to move through them is what separates those who reach their goals from those who remain stuck in cycles of hesitation. The key is understanding that you don't have to feel good to act with clarity. You can acknowledge the storm without surrendering to it. Just as a sailor learns to navigate rough seas, you can learn to steer yourself through turbulent emotions. This requires presence, being aware of what you're feeling without letting it dictate your decisions. It's not about suppressing emotions or pretending they don't exist. It's about seeing them for what they are, temporary conditions, not permanent truths. When you are in the middle of an emotional storm, your mind will try to convince you that the feeling is forever. Sadness will tell you it will never lift. Anger will whisper that it will always burn. Fear will insist that you are in danger even when you are not. But storms pass. They always have, and they always will. The problem is, when you let them control your actions, they can last far longer than necessary because you're feeding them with avoidance and inaction. One of the most powerful ways to weather these storms is to anchor yourself in something beyond your current mood, your purpose, your values, your commitments. These act as lighthouses in the dark, reminding you of your direction, even when visibility is low. When the waves of emotion try to pull you off course, these anchors keep you steady. They give you a reason to keep moving, even if your progress is slower than usual. It's also important to remember that not all storms are destructive. Sometimes they clear away illusions, forcing you to confront truths you've been avoiding. Discomfort can be a form of guidance, pointing out what needs to change. Fear can highlight the exact area you need to grow in. Frustration can reveal where your boundaries are being crossed. If you see storms not as enemies but as messengers, you can begin to use them rather than simply endure them. Still, navigating emotional storms takes skill. It means resisting the urge to make big decisions in the heat of a feeling, because emotions distort perception. In anger, you may burn bridges you'll later wish you had crossed. In sadness, you may abandon projects that were about to bear fruit. In fear, you may avoid opportunities that could have changed your life. Acting from emotion alone is like steering a ship based on the direction of the wind rather than the map. You'll move, but you might end up far from where you intended to go. This is why habits and routines are so valuable. They act as a stabilizing force when your emotions are unstable. A morning ritual, a set work schedule, a daily workout, these small, consistent actions can ground you when the storm inside threatens to throw you off balance. Even if you don't feel like doing them, the act of showing up reinforces your control over your own life. It's a way of saying, yes, I feel this storm, but I will not let it decide for me. Resilience is not built in sunny weather. It's built in the rain, in the wind, in the moments when you feel like stopping, but choose to keep going. Every time you act, despite the storm, you teach yourself that you are stronger than the temporary chaos inside you. And over time, this builds an unshakable confidence, not the false confidence of someone who believes life will always be easy, but the real confidence of someone who knows they can handle it when it's not. There's a certain peace that comes from knowing storms don't define you. They are passing events, not permanent states. You can feel anger without becoming an angry person. You can feel fear without becoming a fearful person. You can feel doubt without living as a doubtful person. This separation between what you feel and who you are is essential. It allows you to act from a place of stability, even when your emotions are anything but stable. And here's the truth. Some of your greatest growth will happen in the middle of storms. You'll learn patience when you can't force the clouds to part. You'll learn discipline when you keep moving despite the wind. You'll learn faith when you can't see the path, but walk it anyway. These are not lessons you can learn on sunny days. They require the challenge of turbulence to take root. When you realize this, you stop seeing emotional storms as setbacks and start seeing them as opportunities to practice strength. You stop waiting for calm to act and instead act your way through the chaos. And in doing so, you discover that while you can't control the weather, you can always control the direction you choose to steer. Rituals are more than routines. They are the structures that give shape to the formless chaos of our days. While moods fluctuate, while circumstances shift without warning, rituals remain, a steady rhythm that grounds you when everything else feels uncertain. They are not just habits repeated mechanically. They are deliberate actions chosen to anchor your mind, body, and spirit in something stable. In a world that constantly pulls your attention in 100 directions, rituals act as a kind of compass. They remind you where you are and what matters, even when the emotional weather inside you is turbulent. You may wake up feeling tired, restless, or unmotivated, but if you have a ritual, you don't waste the morning negotiating with yourself about whether to start. You simply begin, because beginning is part of who you are. Rituals create stability because they are not dependent on how you feel in the moment. A good mood might make them easier, but their power lies in their independence from emotion. Think of them like the rails on a train track. They keep you moving toward your destination, whether the landscape is sunny or stormy. Without them, you drift, easily swayed by each passing distraction or each sudden change in your inner state. It's tempting to dismiss rituals as unnecessary, especially if you think discipline is only for people who lack inspiration. But inspiration is unreliable. It's like a guest who shows up unannounced and leaves without warning. If your work, your growth, or your commitments depend solely on its presence, you'll produce in bursts, then stall for long stretches. Rituals ensure that the work happens whether or not inspiration decides to visit. Some people misunderstand rituals as restrictive, imagining that structure will suffocate creativity or spontaneity. But in practice, rituals often create the space for freedom. When certain parts of your life are automated through consistent action, you free up mental energy for deeper thinking, problem solving, and creative expression. It's the difference between constantly figuring out where to start and knowing exactly what to do next. Consider the ritual of a morning routine. It doesn't have to be elaborate. Maybe it's a short meditation, a glass of water, and writing down 3 priorities for the day. What matters is not the specific actions, but the consistency of them. Over time, your mind begins to associate the ritual with readiness. You no longer have to wrestle with inertia in the mornings because the ritual carries you forward like a current. Rituals are also a safeguard against the days when your emotions feel like quicksand. On those days, motivation is slippery and even small tasks can feel overwhelming. Without rituals, it's easy to sink into inaction. But if you have a pre-established rhythm, you can step into it automatically. You don't have to think about whether to do it, you just do it. And that action, however small, often generates the momentum needed to keep going. One of the overlooked strengths of rituals is how they accumulate. A single repetition may seem insignificant, but rituals compound over time. 10 minutes of daily reading adds up to dozens of books a year. 15 minutes of writing each morning becomes entire manuscripts over the course of a few years. What seems like a small daily act becomes a defining part of your life story simply because you repeated it. There's also a psychological security in rituals. In uncertain times, they become an anchor of familiarity. When the outside world feels unpredictable, your ritual remains the same. This predictability is not dull. It's deeply comforting. It's a way of telling yourself, no matter what's happening, I still have control over this part of my life. That sense of control can be the difference between feeling overwhelmed and feeling capable. The beauty of rituals is that they can be tailored to fit any life. They don't need to be grand or time-consuming. In fact, the simpler they are, the more sustainable they become. A single daily walk, a few minutes of journaling, a fixed time to review your goals, these are small enough to maintain, but significant enough to create stability. The power lies in the repetition, not the scale. The creation of a ritual requires intention. You cannot simply pick an action and expect it to stick without purpose behind it. A ritual gains strength when it's connected to something you value deeply. If you understand why you are doing it, you're more likely to keep showing up even when it's inconvenient. The why transforms a habit into a ritual, elevating it from a mindless task to a meaningful practice. Rituals change you. They shape your identity. You stop thinking of yourself as someone who occasionally does the thing, and you start seeing yourself as the kind of person who always does it. This shift in identity is powerful because it reinforces itself. If you believe you are consistent, you will act consistently. Rituals do not remove the challenges of life. They don't prevent setbacks, failures, or emotional storms. But they give you a steady ground to stand on while facing them. They ensure that even on the worst days, you are still moving, still showing up, still doing the work that matters. And in the long run, that quiet, unwavering consistency will carry you farther than bursts of action fueled only by good moods. When you understand this, you stop treating rituals as optional and start treating them as essential. They are the foundation upon which resilience is built. They are the steady drumbeat that keeps you marching forward when everything else tries to push you back. And in a life where emotions and circumstances can change without warning, that stability is priceless. Emotional neutrality is often misunderstood. People think it means being cold, detached, or indifferent, as if to be neutral is to lack passion. But true neutrality is not the absence of feeling. It is the ability to see your feelings clearly without being ruled by them. It is the art of standing in the middle of a storm and noticing the wind without being blown off course. When you are neutral, you are not at the mercy of emotional highs and lows. A good mood may still feel pleasant, and a bad mood may still feel heavy, but neither one becomes the sole driver of your decisions. You can act in alignment with your values and goals, whether your emotions are favorable or not. This is a profound shift because most people unconsciously let their emotions dictate their behavior. If they feel inspired, they create. If they feel discouraged, they stop. Neutrality breaks that dependence. Think of neutrality as a clear lens. When you are overly attached to a positive emotion, you may idealize situations, overlook risks, or commit to things you haven't fully considered. When you are consumed by a negative emotion, you may exaggerate problems, underestimate your abilities, or give up on opportunities prematurely. In both cases, the lens through which you see the world is distorted. Neutrality cleans the lens. It lets you see what is actually in front of you rather than what your emotions are projecting. This doesn't mean you suppress your feelings. Suppression is dangerous because it pushes emotions beneath the surface where they grow stronger and influence you in ways you don't notice. Neutrality is different. It involves acknowledging your feelings, naming them, and letting them exist without giving them the steering wheel. You can say to yourself, I feel anxious right now, or I feel excited right now, and still proceed with clarity. The feeling is a piece of information, not a command. The advantage of emotional neutrality is stability. When you are not swinging wildly between enthusiasm and despair, your progress becomes steadier. You avoid the burnout that comes from overexerting yourself in moments of high energy, and you avoid the paralysis that comes from surrendering to low energy. You operate from a deeper place, one rooted in purpose rather than in the temporary state of your mood. Imagine an athlete about to perform on the biggest stage of their life. If they are caught in excitement, they may rush, make impulsive moves, or lose focus. If they are caught in fear, they may freeze, hesitate, or play it too safe. But if they are neutral, aware of both excitement and fear without being controlled by either, they can stay focused on execution. The same principle applies in business, relationships, and personal goals. Developing neutrality is a skill, and like any skill, it takes practice. One way to strengthen it is through mindfulness. By observing your thoughts and feelings without immediate reaction, you create a gap between stimulus and response. In that gap, you have room to choose your actions consciously rather than reflexively. Over time, this practice trains your mind to remain steady even when emotions are intense. Another way to cultivate neutrality is by grounding yourself in facts. When emotions rise, they often carry stories with them, narratives about what something means, about what will happen next, about what kind of person you are. These stories can spiral quickly into extremes. But if you pause and ask, what do I know for certain right now? You strip away the assumptions and return to reality. Facts are stable. Emotions are fluid. Holding on to the facts keeps you anchored. It's also important to recognize the role of neutrality in long-term vision. Many people abandon their goals because they confuse temporary discomfort with permanent incompatibility. They think, I'm not enjoying this right now, so maybe it's not for me. Neutrality allows you to see that a bad day or even a bad month does not define the worth of a pursuit. You can continue forward without requiring constant emotional confirmation that you're on the right path. Neutrality doesn't make life dull. In fact, it often makes it richer. When you're no longer chasing constant highs or running from every low, you can engage more fully with the present moment. You can appreciate joy without clinging to it. And you can experience pain without being consumed by it. You become free to act with intention rather than reaction. It's worth noting that neutrality does not mean avoiding emotion altogether. Emotions are part of the human experience. They add color and texture to life. Just as a skilled driver doesn't let the terrain dictate whether they keep going, you can acknowledge the emotional landscape without letting it determine your direction. The power of emotional neutrality lies in freedom. Freedom from being thrown off course by every internal shift. Freedom from the trap of needing to feel a certain way before taking action. Freedom to live and work with consistency, clarity, and purpose, regardless of the inner climate. When you master neutrality, you stop being a passenger in your own life, carried from one extreme to another. You become the one at the helm, steady hands on the wheel, guiding yourself through both calm seas and turbulent waters with the same deliberate course. In that steadiness, you find a kind of quiet power, one that doesn't depend on the mood of the moment, but on the clarity of your chosen direction. A mood is a signal, not a ruler. It is a passing state of mind, a shift in the inner weather, something to notice, but not to obey blindly. When you treat your mood as a master, it decides when you work, how you speak, what risks you take, and even what you believe about yourself. When you treat it as a tool, it becomes a source of insight, a lens you can use when helpful and set aside when it distorts reality. The danger of making your mood your master is that moods change without asking your permission. You may wake up feeling energetic and creative, and by the afternoon, you're restless and irritable. If your plans depend entirely on feeling in the right mood, your life will be driven by these unpredictable fluctuations. Some days you'll be unstoppable and others you'll grind to a halt, not because your abilities changed, but because your emotions did. Using mood as a tool means learning to work with it, not for it. When you feel optimistic, you can channel that energy into big, ambitious moves, brainstorming, reaching out to people, taking creative leaps. When you feel introspective or low, you can use that state for tasks that require careful attention, detail work, or reflection. Every mood carries potential if you approach it with curiosity instead of judgment. This requires awareness. Most people are so entangled with their mood that they don't see it as separate from themselves. They say, I'm sad, rather than I feel sad, as if sadness were their entire identity instead of a passing visitor. The first step to making mood a tool is to create that separation in language and thought. Your mood is something you have, not something you are. When you see your mood clearly, you can ask, what is this mood good for? Even the so-called negative moods have uses. Frustration can sharpen your focus on what's not working. Doubt can push you to double-check your approach and catch mistakes. Calmness can help you make decisions without being rushed. Excitement can give you the courage to try something new. By framing moods this way, you turn them from obstacles into resources. There are times when your mood is not useful for the task at hand. If you're anxious but need to give a confident presentation, or if you're tired but need to meet a deadline, that's when you set the mood aside. This is where discipline comes in, the ability to proceed with your chosen actions regardless of the emotional state you're in. Discipline allows you to keep moving forward without waiting for your mood to catch up. This doesn't mean you ignore your emotions completely. It means you acknowledge them, respect them, and then decide consciously whether they help or hinder the moment. Think of it like carrying a set of tools. If you need a hammer but you're holding a wrench, you don't force the wrench to work, you put it down and pick up the right tool. The mood that doesn't serve the present moment can be set aside without judgment, knowing it may be useful later. Making mood a tool also means not chasing one particular emotional state as if it's the only good one. Many people believe they need to feel positive, motivated, or inspired at all times to be productive. This belief is crippling because it makes them see any other mood as a failure. But life is a spectrum of emotional experiences, and expecting constant highs is unrealistic. If you only value certain moods, you will throw away half of your life waiting for the right feelings to return. See each mood as part of a larger rhythm. Just as seasons change and each has its own role in the cycle of nature, your moods shift and each has its own purpose in the cycle of your life. Energy comes and goes. Enthusiasm rises and falls. Stillness and rest are as necessary as action and excitement. When you stop labeling moods as good or bad and start seeing them as different tools for different moments, you unlock a steadier, more balanced way of living. One of the benefits of this approach is resilience. If you are only effective when you feel good, you are fragile, easily derailed by a bad morning, an unexpected setback, or a wave of doubt. But if you can adapt to whatever mood you're in, you become flexible. You can keep moving through resistance because you're not trying to force the weather inside you to be perfect. You're simply adjusting your sails to work with whatever winds are present. This flexibility doesn't just apply to work. In relationships, using mood as a tool means not letting irritation dictate your words, not letting euphoria make promises you can't keep, and not letting discouragement lead you to withdraw unnecessarily. It means recognizing that the way you feel in a moment is not always the truth about the situation, and certainly not the whole truth. Treating mood as a tool reshapes your relationship with yourself. You no longer see your emotions as commands you must obey or enemies you must fight. They become signals, sometimes warnings, sometimes invitations, sometimes just background noise. You learn to listen to them without being ruled by them. This self-awareness brings a quiet kind of confidence. You can trust yourself to act wisely no matter how you feel. When you reach that point, moods stop being the driver of your life. They ride in the passenger seat, sometimes offering helpful direction, sometimes distracting you, but never taking the wheel. And that's when you gain true freedom, the freedom to live according to your values, your vision, and your chosen path, with or without the mood you once thought you needed. When you live by long-term vision instead of short-term feelings, you anchor yourself in something far more stable than the tides of your emotions. Feelings are fickle. They shift with the smallest changes in circumstance, a restless night, a harsh comment, a sudden inconvenience. Vision is steady. It is the picture of where you want to be. The deeper reason you are moving forward, the larger story your life is telling. When you commit to that vision, it becomes the compass you follow regardless of the weather inside your mind. Many people let their days be governed entirely by how they feel in the moment. If they feel excited, they charge ahead. If they feel tired, they retreat. If they feel uncertain, they freeze. But a long-term vision allows you to move even when those immediate feelings are telling you to stay put. It keeps you from overreacting to the noise of the present moment. The vision says, this is where we are going, and the feelings, whatever they are, become simply part of the journey. This doesn't mean you ignore how you feel. It means you stop giving your emotions the authority to decide whether your dreams matter today. Vision keeps your eyes on the horizon. If you are walking toward a mountain you've decided to climb, it doesn't matter whether the day is sunny or overcast. You still take the next step. The conditions may influence your pace, but they don't dictate your direction. The power of long-term vision is that it allows you to endure discomfort without losing heart. Without vision, discomfort feels like failure. You start a project and the first difficulty arrives, you take it as a sign to stop. But with vision, difficulty is just part of the terrain. You expected it, you prepared for it, you know that temporary pain doesn't cancel the worth of the destination. This perspective changes everything, because instead of interpreting every challenge through the lens of, do I feel good right now? You see it through the lens of, does this move me closer to where I want to be? When you have a long-term vision, the bad days lose some of their power. You no longer believe that a single low mood or setback defines you. You understand that the journey is measured in years, not hours. This patience allows you to keep moving when others quit. because you are not trying to win in a day. You're building something that will still matter long after your current feelings have passed. Vision also protects you from being seduced by temporary highs. When you chase feelings, it's easy to abandon your deeper purpose for the sake of short-lived excitement. A new idea comes along, a shiny distraction, and it feels good, so you drop what you were building and run toward it. Without vision, your life becomes a series of starts with no finishes. But with vision, you can enjoy the high moments without being led off course by them. The vision acts as a filter. If it aligns with the greater goal, you pursue it. If it doesn't, you let it pass. Long-term vision requires clarity, and clarity often comes from asking difficult questions. What do I truly want to create? What kind of person do I want to become? What will still matter to me in 10 years? The answers to these questions give you a map that emotions alone cannot provide. Moods are momentary. Vision is enduring. When you define your vision, you stop being tossed around by every internal and external change. Holding to a vision is not always easy. There will be times when your feelings are in direct conflict with your chosen path. You might feel impatient when your vision demands patience. You might feel fearful when your vision calls for courage. In those moments, the temptation to abandon the path will be strong. This is why vision must be more than a vague idea. It must be deeply meaningful to you, something you are willing to endure discomfort for. Without that depth, you will trade it away the moment a stronger emotion appears. To live by long-term vision is to trust that your future self will thank you for the steps you take today, even if those steps feel heavy now. It is to plant seeds knowing you may not see the flowers for years. It is to measure progress not by how good you feel at the end of the day, but by whether you are still facing in the right direction. This requires a certain maturity, a willingness to defer gratification, to accept that the most worthwhile rewards are often the slowest to arrive. The discipline of serving your vision instead of your mood builds a kind of quiet power. You no longer fear your low days because you know they are temporary. You no longer cling desperately to your high days because you know they too will pass. You become less reactive, more deliberate. You move with purpose instead of impulse. And in that steadiness, you gain something rare, the ability to keep going long after others have stopped. Long-term vision is not just about achieving goals. It's about becoming the kind of person who can carry a purpose through the changing seasons of life. It's about finding an anchor so strong that no storm, no boredom, no surge of doubt can pull you entirely off course. It's about living by a deeper rhythm than mood alone can provide. When you hold such a vision, you don't just reach the destination, you become someone who could have reached it under almost any circumstance. That is the true strength of putting vision above feelings. We've spent our time together dismantling the idea that a good mood is enough to carry you through life. Moods are precious, yes, but they are also fragile, fleeting, and far too unpredictable to be the foundation of your purpose. We've seen that discipline can outlast emotion, that motivation is an illusion if it's the only fuel you have, and that waiting to feel ready is just another name for standing still. We've explored how to act with clarity even in emotional storms, how daily rituals anchor you when inspiration fades, how neutrality can keep you balanced, how moods can serve as tools instead of tyrants, and how vision can anchor you more deeply than any passing feeling. And now, here you are, aware that the days you don't feel like showing up may be the very days that define you. You see that your life will not be measured by the hours you felt good, but by the moments you acted in service of something greater than your feelings. When the next low mood arrives, and it will, remember this, it is not a signal to stop, but an invitation to practice the strength you've been building. Keep your rituals. Use the mood if you can, set it aside if you must, and keep your eyes on the vision you've chosen. Because the truth is simple. The sun doesn't need your permission to rise. The tide doesn't ask if you're in the mood to swim, and your purpose does not wait for your feelings to cooperate. Walk forward anyway. That's how you build a life that doesn't collapse when the weather changes. That's how you stop letting a good mood be your only strategy, And that's how you win, not just today, but for the rest of your days.